Ratio, an introduction. We use ratio to compare two or more amounts. Let's say we're mixing paint to get a particular shade of grey. For this shade, you need to mix 2 parts of black paint with 7 parts of white paint. This is mixing black and white in the ratio of 2 to 7, which we write with a colon in between, and we say as 2 to 7. The order is important and is quite specific. If you muddle the order, the paint would be far too dark in this example. So here we need 2 parts of black paint to 7 parts of white paint. You need to use the same order for the categories, in this case the paint colours, as for the numbers in the ratio. We'll have a look now at another practical example, mixing a glass of diluted orange squash. Of course, if we want this sort of drink, we don't measure it out precisely, but the example will show how ratio works. To make our orange drink, the label on our particular bottle says you mix 1 part of the concentrated squash with 4 parts of water, that is, with 4 times as much water. You say this ratio is 1 to 4, and we write it like this, using a colon to separate the numbers. With ratio, we aren't talking about actual quantities, but the relationships between the different amounts. So here we are. To make a glass of orange squash, you could mix 50 millilitres of the concentrated orange with 4 times as much water, that is 200 millilitres of water. To make a glassful containing 250 millilitres of diluted orange squash, 50 plus 200. Incidentally, millilitres are sometimes called mils. You would use exactly the same ratio, 1 to 4, to make a jug of squash. For example, to make up this jug with diluted orange squash, suppose you use 200 millilitres, you could say this as 200 mils, of the concentrated squash, then you would need 4 times as much, so 800 millilitres of water. This makes 1000 millilitres, 200 plus 800, which is the same as 1 litre of the diluted drink. Here's another example of ratio, this time using 3 amounts rather than the 2 in the last example. To make a topping for a lovely fruit crumble, the ratio of flour, sugar and fat in one recipe is 4 to 3 to 2 by weight. But again, these aren't specific amounts, so you could use metric grams or the ounces of the imperial system of weights. Each would make a different size of crumble, but they would taste the same because the ratio is the same. So you could have 400 grams of flour, 300 grams of sugar, and 200 grams of butter. Or you could use the ounces of the imperial system and have 4 ounces of flour, 3 ounces of sugar, and 2 ounces of butter. The ratio tells you nothing about the precise amounts, but just the proportions of one number to another. In this case, flour, sugar and butter in the ratio 4 to 3 to 2.